Ladies and gentlemen, as we are about to begin, may I request everyone to remain seated. But before we begin with the program proper, may I inform everyone of a few house rules that we need to follow.
We need to follow these house rules because the entire program of today's lecture, from the singing of the national anthem, welcome remarks, opening remarks, introduction of the speaker, Dr. Ronald Holmes lecture, open forum, and closing remarks are going to be video recorded by the Green Media Group of the Salle University and by the Association of Political Science Organizations of the Philippines. This entire event is being recorded so we can share the lecture and the open forum to political science students of other universities who cannot join us today. It is important, therefore, that we are on our best behavior.
So first, we would like to request everyone to turn off your cell phone ringers. That is, put them on silent mode. Second, please refrain from going in and out of the room. And if you really have to go out, please use the leftmost or the rightmost aisles for your exit and entry. Third, please refrain from talking to your seatmates so as not to bother the other participants around you. Fourth, we enjoin everyone to stay until the end of the program, as the organizers will be issuing certificates of attendance to all of those who have completed today's lecture. We hope for your cooperation and attention. So a pleasant Saturday morning to you all. I am Danilo Briones, a member of the Political Science Society from University of the East.
And I am Rizalyn Bautista, a member of the Political Science Society of the Rizal Technological University.
It is our honor to be your Masters of Ceremonies and moderators for today's much-anticipated lecture.
To formally begin with the program, may I request everyone to rise for the Philippine National Anthem prepared by the De La Salle University.
DNA, lights, go, DNA.
Please be seated.
We are all gathered here today for the third APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science entitled
The National Situation and the Role of Political Science Scholars, Assessing the Present from the Past.
Before we begin, let us first acknowledge our generous partner organizations for this year's third APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science.
So APSOP would like to thank the Political Science Department of the De La Salle University for making it possible for APSOP to use this impressive Natividad, Fajardo-Rosario, Gonzalez Auditorium for today's APSOP lecture free of charge.
APSOP would also like to thank the De La Salle Philippines for the refreshments that it prepared for all of us to partake at the end of today's program. The refreshments are available later on the 6th floor of this Brother Andrew Gonzalez Hall.
Finally, APSOP would like to thank the DLSU Political Science Society for the extra manpower it extended in organizing today's APSOP public lecture.
Let us give all our three sponsors a round of applause.
Thank you. Now, to give us our first welcome remarks, may we call on Ms. Emanuela A. Iliamo, the President of Political Science Society of De La Salle University, to welcome us here to De La Salle University.
Students, faculty, and staff, members of the Association of the Political Science Organizations of the Philippines, invited professors, Dr. Ronald Holmes, our dear friends and special guests, good morning. As political science students, we are always reminded about how important we are in today's society. Our profession is needed to bring back the purpose and true knowledge of how our society must operate, namely the government today and politics as a whole. This talk signifies our strength that once again, political science students are more than ready to learn about our role in today's society and how we could be of help to our countrymen. This is a reminder from our patron, St. John Baptist de La Salle, not just for Lasallians, but for each of us present here this morning. Now more than ever, our society is in need of a proactive citizens, willing and committed to answer the calls of the times. Now more than ever, is the time to showcase what we are students and scholars of political sciences can do. Now, fellow students, let us always be willing to learn more about the social, political, and economic structures in our society. Let our mission be grounded upon the role of uplifting student awareness and involvement towards meaningful, effective, and progressive political participation. Let our aim be always about enabling to advance political awareness and critical thinking in order to empower individuals to be catalysts for social change. In response to our goal, let this be a reminder that political science students are always driven and will always be driven by excellence. Similarly, the La Salle Philippines and the Political Science Department are partners in today's forum, commits itself in increasing awareness and interest of students on national issues, honing future students, leaders, and citizens who are informed, critical, and active in social political concerns does not end in the classroom. Knowledge learned and produced should echo beyond the walls of our classrooms. With you, our partners recognize the importance of collaboration between students and among universities. Allow me to speak on behalf of our partners who made this forum possible. The Political Science Department of DLSU, DLSU PUSO, the Association of Political Science Organizations in the Philippines, and of course, the Political Science Organization of DLSU. We are grateful to be given the opportunity to host this forum, not just because of our shared values and vision of a better Philippines, but more importantly for the fact that it is student-led. Truly, this exemplifies communion and service, an initiative we hope would continue to inspire the youth to be involved in politics. Thank you very much for coming on a Saturday morning, and we look forward to share a fruitful morning with all of you. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Ms. Iliamo, for your welcome remark.
To give us our second welcome remarks, may we call on Mr. Aldin Emil M. De Leon, a member of the Board of Trustees of APSOP and an alumnus of the Association of Political Science Majors at the University of the Philippines in Diliman, to welcome us to the APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science.
On behalf of the Board of Trustees of Association of Political Science Organizations of the Philippines Incorporation, to our distinguished speaker for the third APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science, Dr. Ronald Holmes, Associate Professor of Political Science of De La Salle University. To our partners here in LaSalle, namely the Political Science Department of the Salle University, the De La Salle Philippines, and the DLSU Political Science Society. To the faculty advisors who have helped APSOP organize today's public lecture, Prof. Georgeline Jaca, an assistant professorial lecturer of political science here in De La Salle University and advisor of the DLSU Political Science Society. And to the APSOP Public Lecture Advisor, Professor Crislene Torres Pilapel, an assistant professor of political science from UP Diliman, who, like myself, was also a former member of the UP Association of Political Science Majors. To all the political science professors who are here with us today, who accompanied their respective student delegations. To my honored colleagues in the APSOP Board of Trustees, the APSOP Justices, Directors, Ambassadors, members, and alumni. To all the friends and guests of APSOP, a pleasant morning and welcome to you all. We are gathered here today for what APSOP considers as its most annual activity, the APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science. As indicated in the program distributed to you, the APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science is meant to celebrate the discipline of political science in the Philippines, highlight the discipline's importance in analyzing pressing national issues, and outline the future of Philippine political science. Through the APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science, where a political science professor speaks to political science students, APSOP also hopes to expose political science students to the exemplary scholars of the discipline, who may in turn serve as their intellectual role models on how a political science scholar should be. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huelia.
And to give the opening remarks is the APSOP Secretary General, His High Honor Mr. Kurt Daniel N. Malaka.
To all of the ambassadors, attachés, honorable directors of the Executive Committee, to the honorable justices of the Judicial Council, and the honorable Board of Trustees of the Association of the Political Science Organizations of the Philippines, or APSOP, to all of my fellow political science students, to all of our dear professors, friends, and guests present today, to Ma'am Georgeline Jaca, the Faculty Advisor of the DLSU Political Science Society, and Ma'am Crislene Torres Pilapil, the Faculty Advisor of the 3rd APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science. To our partners for this lecture, the Political Science Department of the De La Salle University, which is led by its chair, Dr. Sherwin Ona, the De La Salle Philippines, led by its president, Mr. Ed Chua, and is also represented here by Professor Gladstone Quarteros, and the DLSU Political Science Society, led by its president, Ms. Emanuela Eliamo. And finally, to our distinguished speaker for today's public lecture, Dr. Ronald Holmes, good morning to all of you. The foundation of every APSOP annual public lecture was built on the idea that a certain political science professor lectures about a current issue of national concern to an audience composed mainly of political science students. As our most honorable Aldin Emil De Leon said in his welcome remarks, the APSOP annual public lecture is meant to celebrate the discipline of political science in the Philippines, highlight the discipline's importance in analyzing pressing national issues, and outline the future of Philippine political science. I am proud to say that today's 3rd APSOP annual public lecture on political science has not only lived up to these ideals, but has done so with the same success that APSOP has had in its past two public lectures. For in today's lecture, APSOP is so fortunate to have one of the country's public intellectuals in the discipline of political science, Dr. Ronald Holmes, to speak to us today. Dr. Holmes is not only an associate professor of political science from this very university, but is also the president of Pulse Asia Research, which is one of the most prominent public opinion polling firms. The topic of Dr. Holmes' lecture is the national situation and the role of political science scholars, assessing the present from the past, which is both timely and significant. It is timely because it fits the current political landscape, which Dr. Holmes said has bewildered a number of observers. It is also significant because today's lecture of Dr. Holmes will arm us, political science students, with an understanding of the present by helping us unlock and remember the past. Just like the past two lectures, today's lecture of Dr. Holmes has also generated strong interest among political science students. Without even counting the APSOP organizing team, Dr. Holmes' lecture today has registered more than 250 participants, which is already beyond the seating capacity of this impressive Natividad Fajardo-Rosario Gonzalez Auditorium. These 250 participants represent not only the political science students of DLSU and members of the DLSU Political Science Society, but also the 16 APSOP member political science organizations from 13 universities from Metro Manila and the nearby provinces of Batangas, Mindoro, and even Baguio. But the distinctiveness of this year's lecture is that it has three DLSU institutions partnering with us in making this lecture of Dr. Holmes a success. We have the DLSU Political Science Department, which made possible the use of this grand auditorium free of charge to APSOP. Next is the De La Salle Philippines, which will be providing the food that we shall partake at the end of the program. And the DLSU Political Science Society for providing the necessary helping hand in organizing this lecture. Of course, the success of today's public lecture would not have been possible without the efforts of the people who composed the organizing team for today's lecture. On the side of the De La Salle University, APSOP is grateful to Ma'am George Linhaha, also an assistant professorial lecturer of political science from DLSU, for her time and tireless effort in making APSOP's partnership with the Political Science Department possible, also with the De La Salle Philippines, and the DLSU Political Science Society. APSOP also owes it to Ma'am Haka for having DLSU's Office for Strategic Communications, or STRATCOM, to video record Dr. Holmes' lecture today. She also coordinated the logistical requirements for today's lecture. Thank you also to Sir Julian Karandang, lecturer at the DLSU Political Science Department, for the advice on the security on logistical requirements for today's lecture. We also would like to acknowledge the help extended by Sir Gladstone Corteros, also an assistant professorial lecturer of the DLSU Political Science Department, for coordinating the sponsorship with the De La Salle Philippines. And finally, to Ms. Emanuela Eliamo for the extra manpower and support that the DLSU Political Science Society has extended to us. On the side of APSOP, I am thankful to all our hardworking and patient core members of the APSOP Organizing Committee, to which I am also a part of. I want to thank these people, Honorable Ivy Marie Silang, APSOP's Deputy Secretary General and the Vice Chairperson for the Organizing Committee, Ms. Angel Therese Druha, our Director for Academics Committee, and the Chairperson for Logistics Committee, Ms. Cyrene Ferrer, our Director for Internal Affairs Committee and the Chairperson for the Programs Committee, Mr. Gino Miguel Tupaz, our Director for Finance Committee and the Chairperson for the same committee of the Organizing Committee, Ms. Mariel Angela Tuason, our Director for External Affairs Committee and the Chairperson for Communications Committee, and last but not the least, Mr. Jersey Vertusio, our Director for Socio-Political Affairs and the Chairperson for Registrations Committee. Without them, the completion of the tasks for today's lecture would be impossible. Despite their busy schedules given the examinations and other school-related activities, they still found the time to undertake all these tasks. Thank you so much, and I deeply appreciate all of your hard work and patience you have shared to me and the entire organizing team. I would also like to thank the APSOP's Honorable Board of Trustees for being the core members of the overall committee that oversaw the preparations for today's public lecture. They have worked side by side with the APSOP Organizing Committee despite their numerous tasks, commitments, and jobs. Especially the Most Honorable Aldin Emil M. De Leon, Right Honorable Ralph Gabriel Duela, and Right Honorable Mina Rafanan, all of whom have shared their experience in guiding the organizing team throughout the preparations. Last but not the least, on behalf of the APSOP Public Lecture Organizing Committee, I would like to thank the 3rd APSOP Annual Public Lectures Advisor, Professor Crislin Torres Pilapil, Assistant Professor of Political Science from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, for all of her invaluable assistance and guidance to ensure the success of this event. As the chairperson of this year's APSOP Public Lecture, let me now open the 3rd APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science that features Dr. Ronald D. Holmes as its guest speaker. Thank you, and may we all have a great and blessed day.
Thank you, Your Honor Malacca, for your opening remarks.
Since we have formally welcomed and today's lecture had been opened, we shall first introduce our participants in today's public lecture. In addition to the political science students of De La Salle University and the members of the DLSU Political Science Society, our participants in today's lecture also come from the 16 APSOP member political science student organizations representing 13 universities.
Let us call them in alphabetical order. We start off with Alliance of Students for the Advancement of Politics, University of Caloocan.
The Association of Junior Political Thinkers from Divine World College of Calapan.
Association of Political Science Majors, University of the Philippines, Diliman.
Politically inclined students from University of the Philippines, Baguio.
Political Science Circle from University of Batangas.
Political Science Society, Rizal Technological University.
Political Science Society, San Sebastian College, Recolletos.
Political Science Society, University of the East.
Political Science Student Organization, Araulo University.
Political Science Students United in Living Out its Identity of Truth, Integrity, Knowledge, and Academic Supremacy, Politica, the Adamson University.
Samahan sa Agham Pampolitika, University of the Philippines, Diliman.
The Letran Politicus from the Colegio de San Juan de Letran.
The Political Science Forum, University of Santo Tomas.
People-Oriented Leadership in the Interest of Community Awareness, University of the Philippines, Diliman.
UP Political Science Society, University of the Philippines, Manila.
Lastly, the UP Political Society from University of the Philippines, Diliman. For the next part of the program, we have bestowed the honor of introducing our speaker to Mr. Irvin R. Gabupo, President of the Political Science Society of San Sebastian Recoletos, Manila. Let's give him a big hand.
Good morning. It is my honor to have this chance to introduce our speaker for this year's 3rd APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science. Dr. Ronald D. Holmes is an Associate Professor in the Political Science Department of De La Salle University. He is also the current President of the research organization, Pulse Asia Research Incorporated. He has also served as a 3-time President of the Philippine Political Science Association and as a chair of the Governing Council of the Philippine Social Science Council. In terms of his research interests, Dr. Holmes has pursued researches in the area of comparative politics that specifically focus on democratization and political contestation, public finance, and public opinion. Dr. Holmes obtained his Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, History Political Science from De La Salle University, his Masters of Arts in Political Science from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and his PhD in International Political and Strategic Studies from the Australian National University. His doctoral dissertation examined the persistence of particularistic spending and the practice of pork barreling in the Philippines at the national and local government levels. Employing frameworks from political economy and comparative politics, his dissertation recommended measures that will prompt more programmatic for development spending. To my fellow political science students, professors, ladies and gentlemen, Please join me in welcoming to the stage our distinguished speaker, Dr. Ronald D. Holmes.
Magandang umaga, magandang papa. Good morning to all of you. First of all, I'd like to thank APSOP for this invitation. I was invited last year for the second annual lecture. Unfortunately, I was out of the country. Specifically, I'd like to thank all the organizers, the faculty advisor of APSOP, Professor Torres, our faculty advisor of the Political Science Society, Professor Jaka, the president and the officers of the Political Science Society of De La Salle, and De La Salle Philippines, whose support is an initiative of my colleague in the department. I don't know whether he's here, Professor Porteros. The topic that I gave, as you see on the tarp, it's kind of weird to see my face on the tarpaulin, is the national situation of the role of political science scholars assessing the present from the past. I think the abstract of the lecture has been posted on the Facebook page. I will not elaborate on it. On the role of political science scholars, our Poli-Sci President Ella had mentioned the hope that maybe after this lecture or even before this lecture, our political science students who are political science scholars will be proactive in terms of examining Philippine politics or examining politics, and eventually this examination will lead towards more meaningful, effective, and progressive participation on the part of the youth, your age group, 18 to 24. Next slide, please. Now, outside the presentation, I just covered three, and the third one will be pretty short. The first one would be to discuss the current national situation and the prospects for the medium term. The second part would be to focus on history and answer the question, why are we here? Why are we where we are? Bakit tayo nasa kalagayan natin ngayon batay sa ating kasaysayan? And the last part is to answer the question what scholars or students of political science can do, and I will not answer this question exhaustively. Let me begin with the national situation. Next slide, please. This chart is from the social weather stations, and this chart will illuminate the current situation in our country. We have a pretty popular president. In terms of net satisfaction ratings, as you see, from 1986 to 2019, the current president, Rodrigo Roa Duterte, enjoys, in the last social weather station survey of the third quarter 2019, a plus 65 net satisfaction rating. The chart clearly illustrates that among all presidents in the post-Marcos era, you have 6 that are indicated on the slide. Duterte is a top-notcher. Next slide, please. In surveys done, on the other hand, by our own organization, Pulse Asia, if you compare the trust ratings of 4 presidents from Estrada, since Pulse Asia was established in 1999, to Duterte, the level of trust towards the current president remains at 3 out of 4 Filipinos. This leads to the question, next slide, that is posed by both critics as well as supporters of the president. Why are people satisfied with and trust the president? Let me try to explain it, at least partly. One of the explanations that have been given by a sociologist, by Randy David, in one of his articles, is that Duterte basically has charisma. And charisma is pretty difficult to define. There are definitions of charisma in the social sciences. They have a Weberian definition of charisma. But as pointed out by a number of social scientists, charisma is like love. It is, or beauty, it is in the eyes of the beholder. But let me come up with some explanations as to why Duterte, or the president, continues to enjoy significant majority satisfaction and trust. Next slide, please. This is a chart that shows the country's economic growth per quarter across the administrations in post-Marcos Philippines. So, I don't have a pointer, so I divided this into the 6 administrations. The first one on the left, from 1986 to 1992, is the administration of President Corazon Aquino. The second one is the administration of Fidel Ramos. And you see a dip sometime in 1997. This is a result of the Asian financial crisis. The next one will be the short term of President Joseph Estrada, where the country grew on an average of about 3%, the GDP, I mean, annually. The next one is the long term of President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, where the country is able to at least post uh, remarkable growth, except in 2009. This was in the global financial crisis. The next administration would be under Noynoy Aquino, when the average the economy grew by 6%. And lastly, you have 27 and 2018 figures under President Duterte. I'm going to say that the material base of people's expectations of government is pretty rosy, at least for the administration. We've had continuous growth from 2011. Growth that at this point, for example, the Philippine Statistics Authority just reported on the third quarter growth. It's a 6.2%. We're the second fastest growing country in Southeast Asia or in Asia, next to Vietnam. So you have a material base that is basically percolating in more appreciation for the president. Next slide, please. The president's satisfaction and trust can also be argued to be a result of a reduction in terms of poverty. This is official poverty. This is relative, absolute poverty measured in terms of the threshold. Let me explain, however, that in this particular figure, you see that the poverty incidence among Filipino families in the first quarter of 2018 dropped significantly. It is now just about 16%. But however, the threshold that has been set for a family of 5 to escape poverty is only 10,481 pesos per month. Let me ask you, you're all students, how many of you have allowances that exceed or are close to 10,000 pesos a month? No one will answer because that would mean that you would have to give us a free lunch later. But 10,181 pesos for a family of 5 is the threshold that is set by government for a family of 5 to be beyond poverty. To me, this is a pretty low threshold. But nonetheless, we have seen a reduction in terms of poverty. We have also seen some distribution of income, particularly among the lower middle income class group. So again, the economic basis of people's perception about the performance of government can also be positively influenced by this particular figure. Next slide, please. The next slide is a quadrant that shows where Filipinos generally are. There are 2 questions that are normally asked in a survey. The first question is, what is your quality of life now compared to the past year? And the second question is, what would be your quality of life in the next year? On the first question, respondents are given 3 choices. The quality of life now compared to the past year has improved, it's better, remains the same, or almost the same, or has worsened. If they say that it is better, they are qualified as gainers. You see the topmost quadrant there. If they say that it is the same, it's basically not shown in the chart, but if they say that it has worsened, they're classified as losers. When people are asked whether the quality of life will improve in the next year, the ones who say it will improve are labeled as optimists. The ones who say that it will worsen are labeled as pessimists. Where are Filipinos in this quadrant? Across surveys that have been done by social weather stations and by Pulse Asia. Most of the observations are in the lower half, lower left part of the quadrant. Filipinos generally are losers, optimists. That means when people ask us what has happened to your life in the past year, we say that it has worsened, but we expect that the quality of life will improve in the next year. However, under the last 2 administrations of December 2015 to the current period, September 2019, Filipinos have moved to gainers optimists. There is an article that was published in a referee journal that concluded that the Filipinos' appreciation of the President's performance is based largely on their assessment of their quality of life. If their assessment of their quality of life is that it has improved and it will improve, they generate more approval or satisfaction and trust towards the President. So you have the President right now, basically the economy is doing well, poverty has been reduced, and essentially people's self-assessed quality of life has also improved. As you see there, most of the observations in Gainers Optimists are from December 2015, that is Noynoy Aquino's time, to September 2019, that is under President Duterte's time. Prior to these 2 instances, there were only 2 instances in the past when Filipinos were Gainers Optimists. The first one was in March 1986, right after the People Power uprising in EDSA, the first one. And the second one was in March 1987 after the ratification of the Philippine Constitution. That's a good sign. Now, people are wondering why Duterte's satisfaction and trust are still quite significant, are at the significant majority level. Let me now go to the next slide, which is side B. The people who are bewildered as to why the president continues to be appreciated by a sizable part of the public, despite many controversies, or despite many conditions. Here I discuss certain events or certain developments at present. Next slide, please. First one is that Congress remains controlled, or is controlled by the president. We all know what happened in the midterm election of 2019, right? What happened to the opposition? They were shut out in the senatorial race. Not one of the oppositionists won in the senatorial race. However, if we go back to history, except for two administrations in the past, this is under Macapagal in 1961 and Marcos in 1965, no president, all presidents I mean, have always enjoyed considerable support from Congress. The first president of the Commonwealth actually controlled Congress more than any other president. He would go to Congress, he would write the budget, and he would submit it right there and then to Congress, and Congress would just rubber stamp the budget. You know the first president of the Republic, I mean of the Commonwealth. His name is I don't see a sign of silence, please. I ask anybody this one. His name is Manuel L. Quezon. All presidents have basically enjoyed supermajority or majority support from the lower house of Congress. Most presidents have faced opposition, not from the lower house, but from the upper house. Why is it that presidents in the Republic normally confront challenges from the upper house? The basic thinking there is that the upper house, which is the Senate, with 24 members, enjoy the same constituency. They're elected nationally. The president is elected nationally. The senators are also elected nationally. The other thing is that those senators will eventually aspire for the highest position in the land. So in 2022, I don't know if you believe rumors, who would you vote for? Would you vote for any one of the senators who are aspiring? But of course, those are rumors, and we do not work with conjectures. Nonetheless, what we need to understand right now is that you have a Congress, a lower house that basically would just simply approve anything that the president has, but you have an upper house that has shown some degree of independence, which is proven by the latest report coming from the Senate on the Ninja Cups. 20 of the 20 senators who are members of the committee, only one senator did not sign the majority report that pins down the former PNP chief as accountable for the release of policemen. 19 senators signed the report that urged for the filing of criminal and administrative cases against the former PNP chief. The only senator who did not sign it is Senator I don't see a silence, please sign again. The Senator Lito Lapid. Next slide, please. In the present political system, we do have a Supreme Court that in 2022, only 3 members of the Supreme Court would have not been appointed by President Duterte. As we know, Congress and the Supreme Court are supposed to be 2 institutions that will check the abuses and powers of the President. However, we've seen how the Supreme Court has been basically shackled by the President. The first time that that happened was under martial law, when the Supreme Court did not in any way rule on political questions, on the legitimacy of the declaration of martial law, and the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus. More recently, under Noynoy Aquino, we saw the impeachment and conviction of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court without a hearing in Congress. And most recently, in 2018, we saw the removal of an incumbent Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, allegedly because she does not qualify as Chief Justice on a co-warrant of petition. So is the court insulated from politics? Yes, it is, theoretically, if you look at the Constitution, because members of the judiciary are supposed to be appointed based on recommendations of the Judicial and Bar Council, but all indications point to the fact that you do have courts that are vulnerable to interventions coming from elected politicians. As I said, in 2022, except for 3 members of the court, and we don't know whether those 3 members would survive, 12 members of the court would have been appointed by President Duterte. The Supreme Court is not the only constitutional institution or commission that would have been filled up with Duterte appointees. The other commission that will be completely filled with Duterte appointees in 2022 is the Commission on Elections. And there are fears that if the Commission on Elections will be full of Duterte appointees, we might see a repeat of tainted elections that we've had in the past. If we go back to Philippine history, there are at least 4 elections whose results have been questioned. The first one was in 1953 under Quirino, where Quirino basically used the resources of government to win against his opponents. He even brokered a deal between his party and the Nationalista Party to come together in order to secure the election. The second one was in 1969, Marcos's re-election as president, which on record is supposed to be the most violent and fraudulent election. The third one was in 2004, and you know what happened? Hello, Garci. And the fourth one might be 2022. We don't know because no one among us can predict what will happen in 2022. Next slide, please. Another lamentable development at present would be the continuous attack on press freedom. This is a map that shows the state of press freedom in the world, and countries are color-coded. The countries that are white would be countries where the situation for the press is free, generally. Countries that are yellow would mean that the press is generally safe. Countries that are orange would mean that there's a problematic situation. Countries that are black would mean that the situation is very difficult for the press. And the Philippines is red, which means that the situation for media in the Philippines is difficult. If we hark back from 2016, after the election of President Duterte, the press has been constantly under attack. The first media institution that was criticized by Duterte is the Inquirer. Eventually, the owners of the Inquirer had to divest themselves because Duterte threatened them cases of tax evasion. The second one was, of course, Rappler, and we all know what Rappler confronted. And then the third one is the pending franchise of the largest network in the Philippines, which is ABS-CBN. Another report points out that the number of killings of media personalities in the Philippines continues to be the highest in the world. Of course, these killings cannot in any way be attributed to the state, but nonetheless, this shows the difficult situation that media, which is an institution that is supposed to be independent and report on whatever are happening in government, both the good and the bad, media is really in a situation wherein it is not necessarily viable to, when they're vulnerable to all of the attacks coming from the state. Next slide, please. The current situation also means that we have somehow had problems in terms of the rule of law. This is a picture that was taken by Rafi Lerma, who used to be with the Inquirer. It is a picture that I just simply used to indicate the problem that we've been confronting from 2016, a problem that might change given that there has been a new interagency committee that was created. The number of summary executions or extrajudicial killings, the official figure given the Philippine National Police is 6,000. This 6,000 is more than the number of extrajudicial killings under Marcos and under Aquino. That's the official figure. The figure given by some other organizations, human rights organizations, is that it is hitting more than 30,000 extrajudicial killings. In our own surveys, 75% of the public say that they fear being victimized by extrajudicial killings. But this simply indicates that the state has made use of violence, not only now, but even in the past. And it's a type of violence that is really meant to secure that the state or its leaders can perpetuate themselves in power. The last condition, next slide please, would be a crackdown on militants. They used to be allies of the president, now they're opponents of the president. The most recent event was the arrest of 56 members of legal organizations in Negros Occidental. To me, this is an indication of exclusionary politics that we've seen from way back the Commonwealth period. There was a time after the post-war where members of progressive organizations were elected as members of Congress, and they were excluded from participating in Congress for a short period of time until Congress passed the parity rights law that they did not in any way pray for. Let me now go to the next slide. Those are conditions that indicate what the state has done or what has been produced largely by government action. But let me now focus on conditions from below. By conditions from below, I mean certain indications of where people stand in terms of political participation. There are two pictures on this slide. The left one, which is I think covered by I cannot move the tarpaulin, it's taped to the floor. The one on the left is a mass rally that was organized by the Movement of Concerned Citizens for Civil Liberties, held at Plaza Miranda in Quiapo. I don't think many of the students here have gone to a rally in Plaza Miranda. Now they simply sell anything that is pirated in that area. This was a rally that was meant to oppose the declaration of martial law that was exposed by Ninoy Aquino. It was called Oplan Sagittarius. This was in 1971. The one on the top there are student protesters. They rallied in front of the old legislative building, which is now the National Museum, when President Marcos was delivering a speech in 1970. Now, these two pictures are pictures of how youth who are idealists have gone to the streets and have echoed their sentiments towards the administration. You can replace the pictures with newer pictures, but you'll probably not find those pictures here in the Philippines. You'll find those pictures happening, or those protests happening in Indonesia. Given that Indonesia recently, the Jokowi, they passed a law that reduced the power of the anti-corruption agency. Or more clearly, the protests that are held weekly in Hong Kong. What we see in the current situation is that people normally do not participate in what is referred to as offline, in the words of some social scientists, offline political participation beyond election. Next slide. Let me show you some figures. Oh, figures are gone. I don't know what happened, but anyway, it's gone. This is a slide that indicates, it's a question that we asked in June 2017, whether people engage in any political activity in the past year. So we asked Filipinos, randomly selected in June 2017, whether they engage in any political activity. The political activities were as follows. One is volunteered for an NGO. Second, posted on social media their views on a political issue. Third, contacted or any elected or appointed official in their local area. Fourth, attended a rally, protest, or demonstration. And then fifth, none. So we wanted to assess whether people or Filipinos are still participating in politics. And it included posting or liking certain political postings on social media. Only 6% said that they posted on social media or liked a political posting on social media. What's startling and what's really lamentable here is that 85% of the public reported that they did not engage in any political activity in the past year. 85%. And that's a large proportion of the public. Why is it that the public has become less civic spirited? Why is it that the public appears to be not inclined to participate in other political activities? And this includes online postings. People are saying that social media has an impact on political behavior. What we've seen in surveys is that it does not necessarily have that impact. Social media remains to be a tool for social networking. Next slide, please. Again, bad. Another thing that we found out from surveys is that when we ask people what do they think that legislators should do, a large plurality, close to half of the public, say that legislators should deliver projects. Only 1 out of 4 say that legislators should make laws. So what does this mean? The expectation of the public of legislators is not to fulfill their primary function, which is really legislation, but the expectations that legislators are supposed to deliver certain projects, which means a continuance of patronage resources. It's a particularistic expectation on the part of the public. Next slide, please. On the other hand, despite the lack of political or the low inclination towards other forms of political participation, Filipinos continue to participate in elections. We're a voluntary system. That means you do not have to participate, but the level of participation in the last election was 78%. Benedict Anderson, a historian, political scientist, said that this is indicative of the logic of electoralism. People participate in election, it's like a gamble. They bet on the winning candidate, and eventually, regardless of who wins, they feel satisfied that the elections would be a means by which they influence public policy. After that, symbolic, because the representation is only symbolic, their expectations are betrayed by elected officials. Next slide. This is a question I would ask all of you, and I will not answer the question. Is the current national situation troubling or exhilarating? Exhilarating. Sorry for the typographical error there. Next slide. Why are we where we are? Next slide, please. My main point in this lecture is that history matters. And I think you've taken this up probably in political science. There are two perspectives in political science, frameworks in political science that explain this. One are theories about path dependency, and the other one would be historical institutionalism. You've taken this up in politics. I would not belabor those 2 points, but let me just stress that there are certain political events in the past that have basically brought us to where we are at present. The first one, next slide, would be continuous elite control and weak parties. Where can we trace this elite control? We can trace it to the American colonial period. A political scientist in the United States, Robert Schefter, asked under what conditions would disciplined political parties emerge and dominate politics. We always say that in the Philippines, political parties are weak. In addressing this question, Schefter adopts a state-centered historical approach that examines the conditions under which these organizations develop. He basically qualified that there are 2 types of origins of political parties. One would be externally mobilized. That means political parties come out of cleavages in society. That means if you look at the history of political parties in Europe, for example, the conservatives will come largely from the bourgeoisie, and labor will come from the working class. So you have those social cleavages that produce political parties. The other one would be internally mobilized. That means political parties emerge after the setting up of representative institutions. And that is what happened in the Philippines. Under the American colonial period, the first political party that was recognized by the Americans was what? The Federalistas. Eventually, the Federalistas lost out to the Nationalistas, when the Nationalistas gave up the position of seeking immediate independence from the Americans. So from that time on, we've had political parties that are basically configured around personalities who are holding elective posts. If you go back to 2016, how many members of the PDP Laban were elected as members of Congress in 2016? 3. How many members eventually shifted to PDP Laban in the lower house? 90. Eventually, PDP Laban from 3 rose to 93 members. Again, where in history do we trace this? We trace it back to the American colonial period. Next slide, please. We'll spend more time. The other historical condition that has really brought us where we are right now is a strong presidency. This is a quotation from Manuel L. Quezon. As Quezon would put it, the executive is given great powers. Perhaps it is due to the fact that some jolly writers of this country have been inclined to call me a legalized dictator. Who is Manuel Quezon? Manuel Quezon, as I said, was formerly Speaker of the House, became Senate President when the Senate was created, and subsequently became Commonwealth President. Before he became Commonwealth President, he was the most influential figure in Philippine politics to the extent that he influenced the creation of the 1935 Constitution, which even allowed the President to seek amendments to the Constitution, which Quezon did in 1940 by extending the single-term limit and replacing it with a re-election. So Quezon here says, a man cannot be a dictator under the Constitution if he exercises powers that are given to him by the Constitution. You take away the name of Quezon and replace it with some other president who has basically asserted his or her will over other elective officials or the public. It is simply not because of the person of the president, it is largely because of what the Constitution provides. The Constitution that we have right now is essentially almost the same as the 1935 Constitution, with the exception of restrictions in terms of the declaration of martial law. In one article, I point out that among elective officials in the Philippines, the President is not only Commander-in-Chief, he's not only Chief Executive, he is Patron-in-Chief. That means he holds the carrot that he effectively uses in order to gain support from other elective officials. The only difference right now of the current president is that he does not only effectively use the carrot, he can also effectively use the stick. Next slide, please. Historically, we've also had an entrenched oligarchy, and we can go back to what we mean by an oligarch. Oligarchs are individuals who command and control massive concentration of material resources that can be deployed to defend or enhance their personal wealth and exclusive social positions. The primary objectives of the oligarch would be to secure, maintain, and retain their extreme wealth or accumulate more wealth and power against all manner of threats. Property and wealth defense are seen as accumulation motives. All studies of Philippine politics will point to the interlocking interest between the political elite and the oligarchs. And you will see this in matters of legislation. For example, in matters of reforming the distribution of ownership of lands, or even on questions of legislation on taxation. As students of political science, probably what you can do right now is to try to examine the pending law in Congress, which is Frame 2, which is meant to reduce corporate income taxes in the country. I have a colleague, there's a colleague in the University of the Philippines in Diliman. I think some of you may have been his students, Amado Bong Mendoza. His dissertation looked at the political economy of tax reform under Ramos. In that process of tax reform under Ramos showed the interest of legislators in terms of protecting the efforts taken by the legislators to protect the interests of those who support them in their own campaigns, so that they are effectively excluded from the value-added taxes that was first legislated under Ramos. So you have an oligarchy and you have a political elite that collude in terms of maintaining the distribution of resources in the country. You have two pictures here. The first picture there is Manuel L. Quezon, who had his own cronies during his time. Celios Peña also had. And you have a picture of a cartoon, editorial cartoon of Ferdinand Marcos distributing largesse to some of his supporters. Next slide, please. The last one that I would point in history is that we have a weak bureaucracy. This is a statement that comes from an American who served as the chairperson of the first Civil Service Commission in the Philippines. Just take note of the statement from the fourth part. He says that while there has been real and substantial progress in the effort to establish and maintain good government in the Philippines, and the struggle against coercive power of patronage has not been in vain, yet the experience of the last 2 or 3 years clearly indicate that a satisfactory future for the services is not by any means assured. Statement from William Washburn. What he simply points out here is that the bureaucracy is weak. It continues to be basically influenced by elective officials. When we see this, the main manifestation of this problem right now would be the prolonged problem that all of us face, most especially over the past week, the problem of traffic in the metropolis. Let me go to a few more slides. Next slide, please. Again, as I asked you a while ago, is the current situation exhilarating or troubling? I ask you also the second question. Is the country's future bleak or bright? Next slide. What can scholars or students of politics do? Aside from engaging in political activities, next slide, I would challenge all of the students here to assess and produce truthful narratives. What we find as a problem right now, which I did not touch on in the earlier part, is that disinformation abounds. We've had history, parts of our history written by what we refer to as revisionists. You have fake news, you have disinformation all over the place. I'm reminded by a comment given by a historian. His name is A.H. Carr. He said that historians basically get a corpus of facts and then they eventually interpret it. So it's like cooking to A.H. Carr. Basically, the historians get all sorts of ingredients and then they cook a meal based on their own style. To A.H. Carr, the difficulty with historians is that you cannot be objective. As political scientists, we're very close to historians because we're also social scientists. Some of us try to examine political events by explaining certain variables, but the challenge that I pose is that maybe we can also focus on coming up with narratives about specific conjunctures in the past that are important to understand what are happening at present. For example, one conjuncture, critical juncture that is important, that there are contending views as to how it has impacted the present, would be what is the value of EDSA 1. I end there. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ronald Holmes, for the truly thought-provoking and enlightening lecture on the national situation and the role of political science scholars assessing the present from the past.
Thank you also to our participants for attentively listening to Dr. Holmes' lecture. We hope you have learned how indispensable it is to know what was in the past in order to assess our present condition.
Our next part of the program is the open forum. But before we open the floor for discussion, here are some reminders on how we will run the open forum.
In order to democratize access and to enable more students to participate in the open forum, we will strictly impose the rule of one question per student and we will not allow any follow-up question. We will also entertain one question at a time so that Dr. Holmes can concentrate in answering it before another participant can ask a question. We request that your question be brief and to the point. You can also ask your questions in Filipino or English.
And also, before you ask your question, please state first your name, your organizational affiliation, and the university you come from.
Also, in the interest of fairness, our format in fielding question is that we will be alternately entertaining one participant's question from each side of the room. So the first question is on this side, and the second question is on this side.
We are now ready to accept questions from the floor. Please raise your hand if you have a question.
Again, you are now allowed to ask questions.
The gentleman is the second row. We will guide you to the microphone. Please proceed to the microphone.
Good morning. Good morning, Papa. Sorry. Good morning, Dr. Holmes. My name is Nat, from Auditorium of Salle University. Ang tanong ko lang po is, based po sa data given by the Pulse Asia, and since we're political science community, gaano po ba kahaba yung buhay ng isang populist leader? Or yung populism, yung buhay po ng populist? Gaano po katagal nag-range yung haba ng duration ng pagiging populist leader? Or for example, si Duterte po, natapos na po yung term niya, and he's considered as a populist leader. Gaano po katagal mag-range yung pagiging popular politician?
Mahirap sagutin yung tanong mo natin kasi una, mahirap i-define po ano yung ibig sabihin ng populism. It's a pretty thin ideology, although the pronouncements of leaders are normally the ones that lead political scientists to classify leaders as populists. Because they tend to be anti-establishment, they tend to put emphasis in terms of laws that are supposed to be, from their own perspective, representative and acting on public interest. So that's the reason why I say it's difficult, because I don't know whether Duterte himself can be classified. What type of populist is Duterte? Definitely he's a populist, but in terms of classifying or categorizing populists, we've had populist leaders in the past, like Ella Estrada, we all know, is also a populist. He spoke about basically alleviating poverty, but he did not last for long, and his popularity also declined immediately after an impeachment was filed against him. Now, Duterte has, as I said, two reasons why his approval, satisfaction, and class ratings have continued to be sustained. One is that the economy is well, and you know that's the bread and butter issue. When people are complaining about inflation, inflation has more or less tapered off. Prices are still high, but the last inflation figure is only 0.8 or 0.9%. So that means that prices did not increase as much over the past month. Second is that there's something that is hard to explain. He has a connection, and that connection may be brought about largely by his character. That character is something that is referred to as charisma. We presented a paper, there's a co-authored paper that was presented by my co-author in the International Political Science Association. We work with data from surveys and FGDs. When we ask people how they would describe Duterte, most of the descriptions given to Duterte were classified by our coders as indicators that Duterte is thought to be a charismatic leader. Now, when will he lose that charisma? I think to a certain extent that charisma would dissipate if Duterte is proven to have engaged in something that would be personally beneficial to him. If he engages in predation, and there have been assertions to that effect, but there has not been any proof. His popularity might decline if we suddenly see an economic downturn, but projections coming from all international financial institutions and even economists and investment groups point out that the Philippine economy would not in any way deteriorate up to 2023. So the conditions are good for a president who has anchored his campaign largely on one issue, which is the fight against illegal drugs. He says that he has failed, but despite his failure, he says that he's committed to proceed with it, and it might decline. It might decline largely in the latter part of his term, but right now we saw an 11-point decline, but it's still about 74%. That's why I said 3 out of 4. So it's hard to say yung time horizon. He is not alone there. Noynoy's approval and trust also did not decline until Mama Sapano. And Mama Sapano occurred the last year of Noynoy Aquino's term. So for 5 years, Noynoy Aquino was able to sustain approval and trust, but because of Mama Sapano, it suddenly declined because people were believing that he actually failed to exercise command responsibility. And he was trying to excuse himself from being held accountable. And he lacked the empathy also towards the victims, both coming from the PNP and from the other armed groups. I hope that answers the question. Maraming salamat na.
Okay, another question from this side. Please proceed on the right side of the auditorium. There will be the microphone.
Good morning po. I'm Auditorium from People's of Manila. So my question po is, on a local level, paano niyo po ma-explain yung, or what are the factors na sa tingin niyo po nag-contribute sa pag-decline ng power ng political dynasties? For example, ayun nga po sa recent elections, yung po natalo sila Estrada sa Manila and yung mga Yusef sa Pasig.
Well, there were a number of, maraming mga matagal na nanunungkulan na natalo. Merong ilan. Maging mga Estrada natalo sa San Juan, natalo sa Manila, Eusebio's loss in Pasig. I would attribute it to a number of factors. One would be the organizing effort on the part of the opponent. I think that's the case for Pasig. With regard to San Juan and Manila, I would say that it's the usual politics, the type of campaigning that involves resources, networks, or brokers that allow those brokers to mobilize support from an electorate that may even be bought. So it's money politics in the case of Manila and San Juan. It would be the advantage of a fresh face and the organizing effort of civil society groups on the part of Pasig. So, magkaiba yung situation. Because in San Juan, it was really a fight between two political elites in the place, right? The Zamoras have also always been in representing the district, and the Estradas who've been occupying basically an executive position. In Manila, you had a fight among three contenders, all of whom have been elected officials. Eventually, they bring with them all sorts of supporters on the ground and supporters coming from several sectors, including business. So it's a question of the resources that they have in order to mobilize support for themselves, as well as the promises of programs that they would deliver. I would not discount the fact that people vote largely because of what politicians promise.
Another question?
Hello, sir. I am Marlu from the Political Science Forum from UST. Sir, if I remember correctly, in 1986, the political participation of Filipinos were relatively high. But today, for some reason, nag-dissipate siya. And marami naging controversies since noon, Cory until Aquino. Now my question is Duterte a product of our failing democracy or a failed 86 revolution? That's all. Thank you.
You have two parts of the question, Marlo, but I'll answer the second part. Is Duterte a product of failed expectations after the transition from martial law to what have you after 1986? Because after 1986, you can still qualify that the Philippines is democratic in the strictest sense of what the democracy means. Procedurally it's democratic. The quick answer I would give is yes. Because Duterte harped on an issue that he felt was not being addressed by previous administrations. And then he continues to say things that are more or less pointing out to the culpability of the elite and try to distinguish himself from those elites. Although he is part of the elite, he is one segment of the elite. So it's a failure of liberal democracy as it was projected by previous administrations. But at the same time, we should look at it more historically. What we've actually had in the Philippines is not really completely a liberal democratic order. What we have had really is more an elite democracy. And some of us in the discipline normally don't want to put an adjective before democracy. Some of us, I myself, would want to make democracy something that's a more pure or ideal type. Because if you put an adjective before democracy and say it's a pluralist democracy, a social democracy, or an elite democracy, then that means that it is not necessarily a democracy. Our democracy has always had its serious deficiencies, and I pointed it out earlier. Historically, the elite controlled politics, The first time that we had elections, only the elite who had 500 pesos of taxes, who could speak Spanish and English were able to get elected. Universal franchise was given, but even with the universal franchise, the ones who control positions, elected positions, are going to be basically part of a mix of political elite and oligarchs. So is Duterte a product of all of those? Yes, because Duterte is essentially just at one point, a temporal, what we have right now, this administration is a temporal period across history. Now, I don't know what will happen after this administration. We don't know what will happen in 2022. We don't know whether there will be a sustenance of what some would call a slide towards autocracy. But I leave that for maybe 2022. So yes, he is a product. The reason we have Duterte now is because people felt that he promised something that he can deliver, which he himself said is quite difficult to deliver, which is to rid our country of illegal drugs. He lamented, he said that in the Philippines we have narco-politics, that's why I want to stamp out drugs. But it seems, based on the ninja cups, that narco-politics is actually real, and it involves even members of the law enforcement agency. In the term in political science, it means state capture also. So it's a product, but he himself might be like, the President himself can be held accountable for the failures of the system in addressing many of our problems.
Thank you, sir.
Again, for those who want to ask some questions, you may raise your hand. From this side, is there anyone who's going to ask some question? Okay, the girl who's wearing white. Please proceed to the microphone.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Esteban from the Political Society from UP Diliman. Actually, this is in reference to your question. Whether the country's future is bleak or bright, or whether the country's democracy is promising. I observed that our views are quite limited between whether democracy will only move forward or it will move backward. Pero kasi sa discourse ng democratization, particularly in comparative politics, there are concepts, or actually theory of democratic careening and democratic hollowing by Larry Diamond and by But these theories would say that democracy today, especially in Western countries and those who follow after them, would neither consolidate or even collapse. Instead, yung democracies ngayon, they are in the middle, they are careening. And this can be a result of competing visions of accountability, or either these democracies would only follow the minimal definitions. And I would like to ask your thoughts on this. Basically, I would like to ask kung, do you think tama ba yung sinasabi ni na Diamond na yung democracy ng Philippines, it's only hollowing or it's only in a careening mode where we would neither move forward and we would neither collapse, but instead, we're only following the minimal definitions of democracy? So that's the question.
I've read articles and book chapters in that regard that were edited by Larry Diamond. First, there has always been this question about whether there is such a thing as democratic consolidation. It's a political science, and this is the political science. Political science has the science part. In the science part, before you say it's a consolidated democracy, that means you have to provide measures. The problem is that the measures are actually not exhaustive. When we talk about measures of democratic consolidation, there's a tendency in political science, for example, in the social sciences, that our theories are parsimonious. We take only a few variables, right? It's quite hard to measure democratic consolidation. At what point can you say that a country has consolidated? There were some simple indicators used in the past. For example, if there have been two transitions of power that were largely electoral after a democratic transition, then you can say that the country is leading towards consolidation. Imagine that one, 2 transitions of power. How many elections have we had since 1986? Right? Presidential elections, I mean, 92, 98, 2004, 2010, and 2016. We've had 5 presidential elections. And yet, people are now saying that the Philippine democracy is hollow. We don't know whether it's moving forward or it's moving backward. And then there are new concepts in the discipline that are being introduced by some political scientists. A new form of autocracy, not the old form, not the authoritarian that's institutional. There's even a personal autocracy. And the manifestation of that one, the indication of that one is Vladimir Putin. Now, is Putin and Duterte of the same character? Can you say that the autocratic system in the Philippines prevails because of the character of the president? My response to your question is the same as my response to the initial question. The Philippines has not been a full-fledged democracy from the very start. And in that regard, it's really quite hard to say whether we're going to move forward or we're going to move backward, because even with regard to, let's say, let me ask you questions. How many of you would favor, let's say, divorce? The public is divided with regard to divorce. There's a personal sentiment that is both liberal and illiberal. And the personal sentiment that is illiberal can actually translate to a illiberal position in politics. And you have that ambivalence among Filipinos. You have that ambivalence across all countries. The notion that many people are actually ambivalent Democrats. They will favor the rule of law, but they will also favor personal safety. They will support the drug war as long as they are not in any way victimized by extrajudicial killings. So where do we put Filipinos? Are they liberal or liberal? And the public, people are very important in qualifying a country as democratic. Because if the public has a value that is more liberal, then you will have more support and protection of civil liberties and political rights. But if the public just simply remains passive in terms of protecting civil liberties or respecting political rights, then you will slide down. You will de-democratize rather than democratize. So, ang hirap i-measure, because there are so many measures basically. My main sense is that our democracy has really been severely limited from the start.
For those who want to ask some question, you may proceed. Okay, the guy who's you're raising your hand. You may proceed to the microphone.
Good morning, Dr. Holmes. So I'm Ernest de la Cruz from APSOP, Political Science Society, Rizal Technological University. So, based on our report, the majority of Filipinos are not aware about federalism. So from the topic assessing the present from the past, what is your views on the present advocacy of the president that the federalism is more appropriate to the geographical and cultural aspects of the country against to the current utility of government? Thank you.
I'm trying to make it short. Federalism talks about basically not a devolution, but you bring down many of the powers of the central government to the local governments, right, to federal states. The reality of Philippine politics across time is that the central government is actually weak. What has actually dominated Philippine politics would be local. Local politics has more dynamism, local elites are much more entrenched, and at certain times, the central government could not even discipline local elites. So, I'm not necessarily in favor of federalism. You can face it in such a way that you can move towards more decentralization. Because the one that I fear the most is that eventually what that would happen if the situation, if it's pushed now, and it's good that the president is not pushing it, what will happen is that what is referred to as a clandestine federalism. By clandestine federalism, I mean that some federal states would be dominated by a political clan. And those political clans would initially compete, but eventually annihilate the other political clans. So you have more concentration of power at the at the state level, which is already quite concentrated at the local level. Studies done by Ronald Mendoza at Ateneo point out that if you look at the number of provinces where political clans dominate, basically I think there are 76 out of 80 provinces where political clans dominate. So if you go federal, those political clans that dominate, let's say Region 1, will compete among themselves, but eventually one political clan will be ascendant. That's what I refer to as clandestine. So the concentration becomes much more formal at the local level, and it would be harder for central government that is essentially weak from the Spanish colonial time to the present to try to rein the powers of the local or the federal states. So that's my opinion. Of course, that's an opinion that is not shared by some of my colleagues in the department, and I don't think it's shared also by by a number of the students here.
For those who want to ask some questions.
Good morning. I'm Ronald Holmes from Auditorium, Salle University. My question is in your topic, you showed in the survey that expectation. For example, in the midterm election last in 2019, most people expected that their Congress, or the people they put in Senate or Congress, do projects instead of lawmaking. So as political scientists, what can we do in order to change the mindset of the common people regarding Congress?
Well, of course, there's more education that's needed, but it's going to be really difficult. Mahirap baguhin yung kaisipan ng mga tao. Lalong-lalo na dahil ang gobyerno sa kanila ay actually hindi malinaw kung anong ginagawa. Ang inaasahan nila sa gobyerno kadalasan ay mayroong mga proyekto na ipapatupad sa kanilang lugar. At yun ang inaasahan nila kahit na eksekutibo, kahit na mapapatas. Bakit ganun inaasahan nila? Kasi matagal na sila nabubuhay na walang gobyerno, kaya pag medyo binigyan sila ng kaunting proyekto, ay masaya na sila. Hindi nila naiintindihan na mayroong ibang nasa gobyerno na maaaring iba ang kanilang tungkulin. It's also rooted on the fact that, resources are basically in the control of a few. And the expectation of people is that during election time, those resources, there will be some form of redistribution, at least provinces, and after elections also. So unless you address that unequal distribution of resources, you cannot change the mindset of the public. Because they hold levers of power, and they're the ones who eventually decide on whether those resources will be released or not. So part of it is education, the other part of it is really reform in terms of the distribution of resources. Another part of it would be basically changing the way by which we elect individuals. So that it's not anymore just personal credit claiming, not individuals that would claim credit. You can strengthen parties by changing the entire electoral system into a proportional representation in a closed system like that. So, but of course, parties can still do credit claiming, but at least it's an aggregate rather than individuals.
Good morning for Dr. Holmes. I am Maui Magat from Political Science Society of Salle University. So, it has been in the Philippine Constitution that the state shall give equal access for public services and prohibit political dynasties as may be defined by the law. And as far as I know, if I'm not mistaken, there is no existing law that prohibits political dynasty that would probably help the Philippines to address the problem of state capture and elite mobilization. So, as political science scholar, what do you think that the Philippines can do as another option to solve this problem?
Well, there are options. One is to come up with a enabling law, but you cannot expect legislators who are coming from political clans to pass a law, right? That was the optimism of the Constitutional Commissioners in 1986. Iniwanan nila sa Kongreso yung pagpapasa ng batas para limitahan ang mga political dynasties. So one is to come up with a law that prohibits political clans from fielding members of the same political clan when they're already aspiring for one elective office. Our colleague in the college, Dr. Julio Tianqui, was a member of the Consultative Commission for the Constitutional Change. He introduced a provision in the draft constitution that was submitted to President Duterte, where that is included from the level of vice mayor up. So ibig sabihin, pag meron kang mag-anak na tumakbong presidente, hindi na pwede tumakbo kahit ng vice mayor. But that has to be passed. My main worry is that every time we ask a question as to whether people will vote for a political clan, 1/3 of the public will say they will not, 1/3 of the public will say they would, 1/3 of the public will be undecided. So even the public has a divided position on political clans. So what's the solution to this problem? We cannot prohibit people from participating even if they belong to a political clan. That is supposed to be undemocratic. The thing that can be done is really to change the electoral system to make it more party-oriented rather than focus on individuals. One of the things that were proposed in the past, Congress is 80% composed of single-member district representatives. 20% of them are party list representatives. And even those party lists are created by political clans. One of the solutions there is to make sure that there's a change in the electoral system so that your Congress completely elected via a proportional representation system. And then you set a threshold that is high enough so the political clans would not be able to mobilize effectively in terms of fielding many of their candidates. But that requires a Party Development Act, which also has not been passed by Congress. Both electoral reforms and party development. Ang head ng electoral reforms ngayon sa upper house, if I'm not mistaken, is Senator Amy Marcos, who herself is a member of a political family. So that's the hurdle that we confront with regard to enabling the prohibition of political dynasties. The dynasties who are in Congress would not in any way agree to a law to be passed that will limit their own abilities to sustain themselves in elected positions.
Thank you.
So we will be entertaining last 3 questions.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Natividad. I'm from UP Political Society sa Natividad. And yung factor statement that they told me, I have recently realized seeing that the term is in the it's still too soon to think that the term is the presidential candidate. Because technically nasa honeymoon period for him tayo. He just left honeymoon period. So if you look at the data, it's consistent among the presidents of Aquino, Natividad, that in the first years of office, they have high levels of approval. And then after that, saka lang bababa yung presidential. Yung data that I read yesterday is yung economic perception of them being loser gainers before Duterte, and then to them being winner gainers right after Duterte. So do you think that this is a product of the high presidential experience towards Duterte, or is it endogenous that whether in that may affect yung pagiging winner gainers sa presidential?
It's endogenous to Duterte. You can think of it as an independent variable. People's perception of their quality of life, their self-assessed poverty, is the one that impacts on their satisfaction of the president's performance, rather than the opposite. Because if they feel that their material well-being is better now, then they tend to approve more of the president. So, iwalay siya. It's a cause rather than an effect. I agree with your opinion. There might be a decline. But the reason I said that natural, maybe it's relative to the period. If you look at all previous presidents, at this period in time, the net satisfaction rating of Pinoy was 60, less than 60. was actually, I think, about 30. Duterte has a 65 net satisfaction. So it's much higher than the net satisfaction of Pinoy. I don't, although in Pulse we don't do the net, the approval, the gross approval rating of Duterte is almost the same as the gross approval rating of Noy Noy at the same time. Noy Noy had 72, Duterte has 75 right now. But still marginally higher. In the past, presidents would maintain their approval or satisfaction ratings only for a year and a half. Noy Noy broke that record. Duterte has met, more or less, matched the record. But these numbers are higher, largely because of significant support in Mindanao, because he comes from the place, and from Visayas, because he is taking more support from Central Visayas, where his family originally comes from. So may ethno-linguistic ties that would also explain why it is hard to erode the level of support for the president, ethno-linguistic and geographical or spatial.
Good morning po. Ako po si Rachel Diaz from University of the East Political Science Society. You have mentioned po kanina na the protest and revolution around the world po. Do you think po na part din po ba namin political science student na mag-participate po, na i-voice out po yung knowledge na natututunan po namin sa classroom instead po na manatili lang sa classroom at intindihin yung mga theories na natututunan po namin.
Baka sabihin, pag sinagot kita ng oo, baka mapigoy ako nito eh. But regardless of the administration, I would say that since we are all citizens, not necessarily because we're political science students, we have an obligation to to hold government accountable. That vertical accountability is something that's important. Now, how do you hold government accountable? Normally, we have periodic elections. So you vote for people who fail to deliver what they promise to deliver. You can go online also, right? As I said, in our own survey, only 6% said that they engaged in an activity where they posted something on social media that was political or commented on something that was political by just simply pressing like. So it can be online. It can be also offline. That means you participate in a protest. But I would caution you in terms of participating in a protest because most recently, part of the crackdown is that everyone who participates in a protest is considered red. I mean, you know, ikumpara nyo lang doon sa nakaraang administrasyon. Nung panahon ni Noy Noy, may magawa si Noy Noy ng maliit na bagay, nagno-noy-noying na siya. I mean, wala siyang nagawa, nagno-noy-noying na siya. Ngayon panahon ni Duterte, if you listen to radio, because I normally travel from here to Quezon City, and my source of distress is actually a source of stress also, listening to AM radio. My golly, wow, they all sing hallelujah to the president, or any of the cohorts of the president, including the most incredible spokesperson that I've ever seen in Philippine history. Why? Why is it such? No? Is it because of fear? And that's something that we have to confront. If you go out to the streets, then there's always that risk that is involved. When I was a student, normally we went, the closest to the Salle is Limasan Bonifacio. There were no masks, we just simply had our shirts made it wet so that when there's a tear gas, we cover your nose. In Hong Kong, they're more sophisticated now, they have masks, right? I would not advise students, I would not stop you from doing it, but the political climate is not, has its risks. And those were the same risks we confronted when we were students under martial law.
Good morning po. Gwen from USD to the Political Science Forum. In our country's history, we've always seen our democracy to be, if not deeply flawed, severely limited. With that, do you think it's time we should contemplate a different form of government that isn't so deeply rooted on Western values?
It's not so much that it's Western or it's not Western, because that's another type of debate that I think has already been proven to be more rationalization of certain systems that some countries would want to impose on their citizens. It's just basically that, number one, governments across the world, and even the Philippines, have really failed their citizens. Just imagine, many of you here would eventually work, and you'll be working until 60. If you're in the private sector like I am, you'll get SSS pension. Your SSS pension is 18,000 pesos a month. When you reach 60 and you're about to get sick more often than you would, 18,000 is insufficient and you work your ass off for the last 40 years. And that's why we say that government is supposed to provide social protection, and that's one thing that governments have failed. And I don't think that's Western. I think that's an obligation of the private government. It's even stressed by those who talk about an Asian values type of government, that the collective has to be benefited. But even the collective, if you look at our indicators right now, the level of inequality has not changed. Poverty has declined, but the measure of someone, a family that is impoverished, is just too low for us to believe that people who earn more than 10,500 pesos should not be considered poor. Stupid. I mean, this is videotape, but I'll hack YouTube later on. So that's my sense. It's not so much a debate between Western and Asian values. It's what government is supposed to do, what government should be. Government should involve both leaders and the public. If you leave it to the leaders, the public would eventually become more emasculated. Government should deliver certain goods, but we have a collective action problem, right? And those are the things that we normally confront. And it's not only in the Philippines, it's also in many other countries.
Thank you.
So we will be entertaining last question.
Good morning, sir. I'm Leona Escota from the Political Science Forum, University of Santo Tomas. May I know your thoughts on the administration's appointment of Vice President Len Robredo as the co-chair of the Drug Committee, and how will this appointment affect the current drug situation in our country? Thank you. How will this appointment affect the current drug situation in our country?
From the very start, the drug problem is a complicated problem, right? It is pervasive, it happens in many communities. The approach of government has been more punitive. It's called penal populism. You strike on an issue, people are afraid about criminality, then you try to stamp out criminality. The Vice President has spoken recently and said she would change her approach. She's actually asking for that Oplan Tokhang be demobilized, and instead a new operation plan be created. I don't know what the operational plan would be, but I hope it's more rehabilitative and it addresses the sources rather than largely the users. There's one bill, for example, in Congress that has not passed. And I myself would bat for that bill because I have a back problem. And my doctor said that this is one thing that's effective. This is the medicinal marijuana bill. In many countries, the use of certain drugs has been decriminalized. And that's many countries. But in the Philippines, we have not gone to that extent. Even the president says that he uses it. So there are certain approaches so that you do not have to really look at everyone who uses drugs as a criminal. You try to look at the source. That's what Len is trying, the VP is trying to do, by simply focusing on big-time drug lords. Like one of the things that she wants to investigate are the involvement of customs officials in the importation of 6.4 billion worth of shabu. It may not make a difference in the next 32 months. This administration only has 32 months remaining. But eventually, it should make a dent, but we don't know what the plan is. Hintayin muna natin yung kanilang plan.
The open forum has finally come to an end. Thank you to everyone for your participation. By way of showing APSOP's appreciation to Dr. Ronald Holmes for his time and for his valuable contribution, APSOP would like to invite a member of the Board of Trustees, His High Honor, Mr. Alden Emil M. De Leon, to give his remarks. Please give him a round of applause.
to our distinguished speaker for the third APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science, Dr. Ronald Holmes, Associate Professor of Political Science of De La Salle University, to our partners here in La Salle, namely the Political Science Department of De La Salle University, the De La Salle Philippines, and DLSU Political Science Society, to the faculty advisors who have helped APSOP organize today's public lecture, Professor Georgeline Haka, an assistant professorial lecturer of political science here in De La Salle University, and advisor of DLSU Political Science Society, and to the APSOP Public Lecture Advisor, Professor Christine Torres Pilapil, an assistant professor of political science from UP Diliman, who, like myself, was a former member of the UP Association of Political Science Majors. To all the political science professors who are here with us today, who accompanied their respective student delegations, to my honored colleagues in the APSOP Board of Trustees, Secretary General Malaka, Deputy Secretary General Silang, former Secretary General Buelia. We are also glad to have with us today former member of the Board of Trustees, Ms. Felisa Villanueva, the APSOP Justices, Directors, Ambassadors, Alumni, and especially freshman students who continue to pursue the discipline, including one of my former students, Ms. Martina Bambina Calios. To all the friends and guests of APSOP, a pleasant morning to you all. We are gathered here today for what APSOP considers as its most important annual activity, the APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science. As indicated in the program distributed to you, the APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science is meant to celebrate the discipline of political science in the Philippines, highlight the discipline's importance in analyzing pressing national issues, and outline the future of Philippine political science. Through the APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science, where a political science professor speaks to political science students, APSOP also hopes to expose political science students to the exemplary scholars of the discipline, who may in turn serve as their intellectual role models on how a political science scholar should be. I am proud to say that I was part of the organizing team that conceptualized and launched the first APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science in 2017. Professor Jean Laksa Pilapil, Assistant Professor of Political Science of UP Diliman, was our first speaker, and his lecture was entitled Federalism and the Institutional Design Literature, the Crucial Role of Political Science in Assessing the Duterte Administration's Constitutional Overhaul Project. Federalism was the centerpiece institutional reform agenda of the Duterte administration and was among the burning topics of 2017. In that lecture, Professor Pilapil demonstrated to the political science majors who came from different universities in Metro Manila and nearby provinces the pivotal role of the discipline of political science in critically assessing the federalism campaign and the broader constitutional overhaul project of the Duterte administration. I am also proud to say that the next batch of APSOP officers, led by then Secretary General Buelia, who is now also an APSOP alumnus, built on the success of the first lecture and held in 2018 the second APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science. It had as its speaker Dr. Benjamin Gerardo Tolosa, political science professor of the Ateneo de Manila University, who spoke on the topic Filipino Social Democracy and the Struggle for Democratization, History Lessons from the Past. Dr. Tolosa's lecture was attended by around 400 political science majors from 34 different schools from Metro Manila, Calabarzon, and Northern Luzon. His lecture underlined the importance for political science majors to study martial law, EDSA, and the continuing struggle for democratization in the Philippines to confront the dangers of historical revisionism of the Marcoses and the threat of renewed authoritarianism posed by the Duterte presidency. Now, on its third year, this 2019, with a new batch of officers led by, this time, Secretary General Kurt Malaka, we are delighted to have Dr. Ronald Holmes as the speaker for the third APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science. The man whom we frequently see on TV or hear on radio for his insights on the survey results of Pulse Asia, which he also leads as its president, has spoken to us today on a topic entitled The National Situation and the Role of Political Science Scholars Assessing the Present from the Past. On a side note, I have enjoyed listening to him on the radio, not knowing that he rued listening to the radio himself. As indicated in the blurb about his lecture today, Dr. Holmes has helped us make sense of the current national situation by reflecting on what he calls the historical roots of the predicament that we are in. On behalf of the Board of Trustees and the APSOP alumni, we are, and myself particularly am, overjoyed at the success of this event. Of course, this event would not have been possible without Dr. Holmes' gracious acceptance of our invitation. At this juncture, may I invite Deputy Secretary General Secretary General Malaca, and the members of the Board of Trustees to present our plaque of appreciation to our dear speaker, Dr. Holmes.
Thank you, Your Honors. Now, may we call on the Deputy Secretary General of APSOP, Your Honor Ivy Marie Silang, to give the closing remarks. Let's give her a big hand.
Dr. Ronald Holmes. To our three partners organizations, the Political Science Department of De La Salle University, the De La Salle Philippines, and the DLSU Political Science Society. To our faculty advisor for today's APSOP lecture, Ma'am George Lynn Haka and Ma'am Christine Torres Pilapil. To the ambassadors and attaches, honorable directors, justices, and members of the Board of Trustees, and alumni of the Association of Political Science Organizations, or APSOP, to my fellow member of the APSOP Organizing Committee, to my fellow political science students, to our dear professors and guests, a pleasant morning. I am honored and privileged to be accorded the role of closing today's third APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science, where we are fortunate to have a distinguished political science professor, Dr. Ronald Holmes, to speak us today. The lecture of Dr. Ronald Holmes is both illuminating and inspiring to us political science students. It is illuminating because in the midst of the confusion among observers of the country's current national situation, Dr. Holmes' lecture provided the all-important and insights to help us clarify the present national situation we are in. At the same time, the lecture of Dr. Holmes highlighted the crucial role of the past
in understanding of the present. As Dr. Holmes argued, it is by reflecting on what he called the historical roots of the predicament that we are in that we could arrive at what to him is a profound understanding as well as a satisfactory explanation of our nation's present-day situation. The lecture of Dr. Holmes is also inspiring. His lecture illustrated to us the power of political science as a discipline, the paths we can pursue as political scientists, and the role of a top-notch political scientist in helping identify, in his own words, the steps that must be undertaken to bring forth a more inclusive political order that programmatically addresses many of the prolonged woes that leaders, past and present, have promised to, but failed to sufficiently resolve. I hope that we can profoundly share to our respective institutions the lessons we learned today from Dr. Holmes' lecture about the national situation and the role of political science scholars. As we cherish the success of today's lecture, it is but appropriate to close by once again acknowledging the organizations and the people behind the success. Thank you to APSOP 3 partner organizations, the Political Science Department of De La Salle University, the De La Salle Philippines, and the DLSU Political Science Society for the help they extended to APSOP. This third APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science would not have been possible without our distinguished speaker, Dr. Holmes. So we thank you, sir, for sharing your time and expertise to us. Many thanks also to Ma'am Haka and Ma'am Torres Pilapil, who have tirelessly coordinated with each other to put together everything that we have in this lecture. Thank you also to the hard-working men and women of the organizing committee from both the De La Salle side and the APSOP side. Finally, the other half of the equation of this lecture success is your presence in today's lecture. With this, I say thank you to all of you for your presence. Let me close by saying congratulations to all of us for being part in today's successful third APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor Silang, for the closing remarks.
To our dearest sponsors and guests, fellow students, and most of fellow political science majors, 1,000 thanks for your participation in making this APSOP's third annual public lecture a success. I hope that this morning's lecture of Dr. Holmes indeed empowered us political science majors to play a pivotal role as political science scholars in assessing our present from the past. I also hope that we will see each other again in the next year's 4th APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science, where we again celebrate our discipline, political science, with a new topic and a new political science professor.
Although we already had our closing remarks, we are not about to leave this auditorium yet, for we still have our photo opportunity. This is a rare opportunity to have our photos taken not only with the speaker, Dr. Holmes, but with all the participants together.
To ensure that we will all have our photo with our speaker, we will do it per organization.
But do not leave yet after your org's photo had been taken, because after all the organizations have had their photos taken with Dr. Holmes, we will have as our last photo with Dr. Holmes a photo that includes everyone in the audience. In the meantime, the APSOP marshals will be assembling your lines on each side of the aisles. As we call your organization's name, please come up the stage.
May we now call on to come up the stage the Alliance of Students for the Advancement of Politics from University of Caloocan.
To be followed by the number 2, the Association of Junior Political Thinkers from Divine World College of Caloocan.
Please prepare. Third would be the Association of Political Science Majors from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. We are inviting Dr. Holmes to please come upstairs here at the stage for the photo opportunity. Thank you, sir. Association of Junior Political Thinkers, please prepare.
Number 4, politically inclined students from University of the Philippines, Baguio, please prepare.
Next will be the Political Science Circle from the University of Batangas. You may now prepare.
Number 6, the Political Science Society from Rizal Technological University, please prepare.
Now we are calling the Salle University Political Science Society to please prepare. We are requesting everyone to please stay here at the auditorium.
The Political Science Society from San Sebastian College, Villegas, please prepare.
Again, we're calling out the Salle University to please come upstairs for the photo opportunity. Again, the San Sebastian College Recoletos, please prepare.
May we call on the San Sebastian College of Recoletos. The Political Science Society from University of the East, please prepare. May we call on the Political Science Society from University of the East. Next would be the Political Science Society from Rizal Technological University. Please prepare.
Again, reminder everyone, for those who have taken their photos, we are requesting you to please return to your seats. Thank you. Because we're going to have our photo opportunity together with Dr. Holmes. Thank you.
The Political Science Student Organization from Arauco University, please prepare.
Again, we are requesting the Rizal Technological University to please come upstairs. Next will be the Political Science Student Organization from Auditorium University.
Next would be the politically inclined students from University of the Philippines, Baguio.
Next is the Political Science Student United in Living Out its Identity of Truth, Integrity, Knowledge, and Academic Supremacy from the Adamson University. Please prepare.
Next would be the Samahan sa Aghampang Politika from University of the Philippines, Diliman. Please prepare.
Again, the Samahan sa Aghampang Politika from University of the Philippines, Diliman. Okay, next, the Letran Politicus from Colegio de San Juan de Letran.
Next would be the Political Science Forum from University of Santo Tomas. Please prepare.
Next is the UP Politica from University of the Philippines, Diliman. Please prepare.
Next would be UP Polsci from University of the Philippines, Manila.
Next would be the UP Political Society from University of the Philippines, Diliman.
Next would be the alumni, friends, and guests of APSOP.
Lastly, please prepare the APSOP organizing and officers. Please prepare.
For our last photo, please refer to the screen for the photo of last year's APSOP annual lecture of the speaker with everyone in the audience to guide us on how we will do our last shot with Dr. Holmes.
Compress please, so that we will imitate this to show how big the crowd is. Again please, move to the center, compress. This was the photo. Where is Dr. Holmes? Ayun.
Congratulations to all of us. Let us give ourselves a round of applause.
Our marshals will now assist you to the 6th floor for the refreshments sponsored by the Salle Philippines.
Once again, I'm Danilo Briones.
And then Rizalyn Bautista.
Your MC saying thank you and see you all again in our next APSOP Annual Public Lecture on Political Science. Mabuhay!